welcome to this week's bonus video. You guys saw the video last night, so thank you so much for watching that. If you haven't done so, make sure you're subscribing to the channel to get updates on what we're working on. We are about to start our real big push to get our personal projects to Florida in a few weeks. So the next videos after this one are going to be kind of focused around that, which is going to get the white 3-valve to Florida, Dan's Cobra, the Tramp, and Zani's GT500. Zani's GT500 is pretty much ready. The Tramp is nowhere close to ready. Zach's is even further away from being ready, and in 2 weeks we're supposed to be at a track rental at Bradenton. So good times to come ahead for that. But this week's rush project is Bob's small block Ford F1X stick shift 94 GT. So I'm going to bring you guys a quick update on this. The reason why this is a rush project is that it is going to Sick Week down in Florida this weekend. And when I say this weekend, I mean today is Wednesday. It's going on the dyno. I got to show Bob how to use the laptop on it because he has no idea what he's doing with it. No offense, Bob. And then he's putting it on a trailer Friday morning to tech in for Sick Week on Sunday. And we just fired it up twice. We fired it up twice so far last night. The car came to us. The car came to us about a week ago with nothing but just the engine and the headers sitting in here. It had no transmission, no bell housing, none of the blower stuff was on. Some of the lines were ran, none of the timing stuff was done. The balancer wasn't on. Pretty much nothing but the engine sitting in here and a few odds and ends tied up that Bob gave us a head start on, which was nice. But the main problem is that he had this engine gone through last year, and in looking at it, all the parts ended up being non-usable, so it got a big block snout crankshaft, which is in theory a really good idea for a Pro Charge stick shift car, but it requires using a big block Chevy balancer. We had to move the crank wheel from the back to the front, which is how it was before. We had to send all this stuff out to get drilled to have big block Chevy bolt pattern so we can still bolt it to the balancer. We had to get a spacer made that would be hub centric so it can still keep this front assembly centered and center it on the rear assembly. And that took like $7 million in overnight parts from Japan and a bunch of hours on a paper and pen to make sure that that was all going to work and keep proper belt alignment. As you can see, that worked out. Everything showed up, and that was detrimental to the success of this. Then we got all that set up. We got the ignition stuff all worked out. We found a handful of other problems while it was here. Few brake leaks, lots of loose hardware, so we kind of nut and bolted the entire car. We removed the front sway bar because he doesn't need that where he's going. And then overall, the education that we've been giving Bob to make sure that he's successful at his next track outing is hopefully priceless in his improvement from last year to this year. So we will be seeing and watching this car. He averaged last year a 10.1 on Sick Week or 11.1, I'm sorry, on Sick Week last year, and we're hoping that he gets at least a 1 second improvement to his average based on some of the modifications. Some of the biggest changes being knowing how to use the 2-step module, knowing how to data log so we can make sure that his data is clean, and we are switching him from a radial to a slick. These are the Tramps wheels and tires. We're just borrowing these for the dyno. He's got a pretty sweet set of RC comps to match. But it's a nice car. It's all redone. All the interior is redone. I don't know how many miles are on it. I think he said it's actually got a lot of miles. He said 170,000 mile car, but literally everything is redone on it. It's got an 850 cage with swing outs. It's a MJE built 363. It's got a billet crankshaft with a big block Chevy snout. That's kind of one of the trick things on it. Oliver I-beams, an F1X. Obviously, it's cog driven. This setup should make about 23, 24 pounds of boost with this pulley combination. We're hoping to see around 1,100 to the tire on C16. And then I think for Sick Week, he just babies it around on 93 octane. And then switches it to C16 at the track. But we are getting ready to take it to Larry's to put on the dyno. So I figured I'd show you guys the startup and moving it and all that stuff. And then obviously we'll have the dyno video here shortly. So you guys can see what that's like. It's not cold in Florida.
go. Can't do anything. Assault. Come on. Come on. I'm not gonna let it get in your feet.
Yeah, I mean, I think I rolled into it pretty hard in second gear, like 6,000 RPM, and it was probably making like 12, 14 pounds. But I put it in fourth gear and like rolled into it at like 2,800. I was just like, and it didn't want to go through the clutch at low RPM, so should be okay. Got her a little dirty.
I'm sure he'll spruce her up a little bit.
First and second was just like,
Spun the tire right away.
Does it have a spool?
Yeah.
Definitely drives like it has one. Definitely pushes. Like trailer hitches like a son of a bitch. And then when the only problem was is I pulled into the parking lot that we like to drift in around the building over there, and it was smoking out of this side, and the air fuel ratio was pretty fat. So I don't know if it got into like a spot that it didn't like.
Yeah, weird zone.
But it was. I was like, oh boy, she's smoking a little bit, but then it didn't do it again.
Smoking white or?
No, like blue. Like oil, yeah. And then the clutch. Then when I turned around, that's when I realized how hard it was to go into reverse. And then I went to go put it in first, and I couldn't get it in first either, and I had to like push my foot through the floorboard. All right, so test drive has went well. No oil leaks. I lied. There is one small oil leak at this fitting, and I hope it doesn't come back. We've tightened it last night. We tightened it again today, so we'll have to keep an eye on this one, because that one to take off and put a new fitting on, it's going to require draining the oil pan, which that kind of stinks. So a little bit of residual on the outside edge there. Rear drain plug has a little bit of residual, but not really concerning. The rear end sounded like it made a little noise, so we just checked to make sure it had fluid. It did. So we're just doing a quick fluid change on that. I don't think the gear ratio in this car is optimal, so when he gets back, maybe we will do a gear change and check all the bearings and everything, because I just heard a little bit of noise for a second. There's the fluid, which I imagine only has a 6 week on it. Yeah, it doesn't look good on camera. That's
Was that in there?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
just dirty cup. Not great. A lot of bubbles though.
Ready for a change.
Yeah, changing it is not a bad idea. Ooh, is this the cord? No, that's a stripe that used to be existent. I was like, Larry's gonna freak. Ah, there's his overflow. Should probably empty that thing.
We did.
Yeah. Pretty clean for 1,000,000 miles. Not bad at all. Better than the Tramp was. Well, seemingly this has been painted already. Now the Tramp is painted.
Underside.
Underside, yeah.
A little bit.
Well, the Tramp hasn't got this. Tramp does have Marty boxes. So this has got a couple pinch rails. Overall, relatively simple setup until you get up here. This is where shit gets complicated. So this snout in the center here, that is a crank support. So there's still another plate that has to go in here with a bearing that's going to slide over that. And then basically the snout of the whole front half of the crank is basically bolted into the chassis for super support, which that's pretty much what I would do if I had a cog drive in a stick shift car. So I don't blame him for doing that. This alternator bracket's pretty sick. I didn't know that was a Pro Charger part number, and it is. So that's kind of cool. All right, so in a minute, you guys are going to see Bob's car on the dyno. So comment down below what you think this thing should make. It's an F1X 363. It's 10-to-1. It's on C16 fuel on 23 pounds, if I didn't say that already. It is stick shift, so minimal driveline loss with an 8.8. Alright guys, so I want to wrap up this video by telling you that Bob's car was a successful mission so far. It's on its way down to Florida. You guys are going to see the dyno poles right now. I'm going to share them with you. I'm going to kind of give you the rundown on what happened and what better car to stand in front of for the details other than the next ProCharge small block Ford. That might look semi-familiar. So Bob's car, we put on the dyno, 100 octane in the tank, made a couple hits, dialed in some timing, dialed in some fuel, typical stuff. The last tune-up was still pretty close, so that helped saved a lot of time. And on its first decent hit, it made 997 horsepower and like low 700 foot-pounds of torque. And we only spun it to like 7,300 RPM. So that went really well. That was a good start, and that was all we were really looking for on 100 octane. We weren't looking to try to make as much as possible. Timing was conservative, fueling was conservative, and it was really as far as we were going to take it without putting it on C16. So once we switched it to the C16 file, then things got really interesting. So on the C16, we were able to kind of get a little bit more aggressive on the tune-up. We put a few degrees of timing in it. We ran it a little bit leaner, and it started picking up power relatively quickly. We got to a point where it was made like 1070 at the tire at like 7,500 RPM. It was making good torque, obviously. And we decided to take the screen that he had on the back of the blower. You can see on the tram that we have a bell mouth, which is the exact opposite of a screen. But he had a little screen, and we took that off, and we also decided to increase the rev limiter about 250 RPM so we could rev it to like 7,800. So with the screen off and another 200 RPM to play with, the car went from like 1060 or 1070 at the tire to 1185. It was nuts. It was crazy. So of course, after that drastic result, we had to do a A-B comparison without the screen, and we left the RPM in it, and the screen itself ended up killing 40 horsepower at the tire, which was pretty nuts to see, and lost power throughout the whole entire curve. So just confirming that anything you really put in front of those things does not help it. We've noticed that the filter itself, the filter alone, if you have an air filter with no bends or anything, that tends to be the least restrictive way to protect it, but you can't always fit that, and that's not always what people go for. So screen killed 40 horsepower. The RPM really brought the F1X to life. It went from 7,524.5 pounds of boost till we removed the screen and went to 26.5 pounds of boost at like 7,500 RPM. And then when we removed the screen and revved it out to 8,000, which was the next pull, it made 30 pounds of boost. So that small 300 RPM increase gained a shit ton of boost at the end with that blow. So it just goes to show that's a badass unit. Only other thing that I wanted to touch base on the dyno session with Bob's car was the small problem we had. So his ProCharger is a little bit different as far as the configuration in the engine bay. So obviously the Tramp, we have it blowing down and are kind of around the frame rail to get to the intercooler. Bob's volute is facing into the fender well here, and then turns and comes down and finds its way to the intercooler. So when we finally got it to make about 30 pounds, Larry lifted right at the end of the pass, and the blow-off valve must not be large enough, and the clamp that held it on into the fender well must not have been tight enough, because as soon as he lifted, it literally blew the boot off and blew the clamp into the fender at such a velocity that I had to put it in slow motion to show it to you guys. It was crazy. It got a little dent in the fender. It literally blew all the dust from all the edges of the fender out of it, and you could see it all on the camera in this next clip. All right, so all in all, Bob's car ended up making just shy of 1,200 horsepower at 8,100 RPM. Definitely willing to go with more RPM and make more power, but it's currently 160 more than he raced with last year, so he's happy with the status of that, and he did not want us to keep whipping on it. He wanted to take it to obviously sick week, so he is en route to Florida. As you guys are watching this, he is driving down there right now, and we wish him the best of luck. We're going to be up here as track support for him, suspension, tire pressure, all those things. Because we were here until 4 a.m. this morning, because once we got off the dyno, we started playing with the two-step settings, started driving it around the parking lot, and it was trailer hitching and had some drivability concerns that you obviously can't address on the dyno. So we spent some time driving it around. I was not liking how the transmission was shifting, and ultimately we ended up removing the transmission completely, adjusting the pivot ball that was set up previously, and it totally changed how the clutch disengaged, how the pedal felt, and how the shift feel was on the Magnum. It was all off, and now it's perfect. And then we had to put his crank support plate on. We had to swap his tires onto it. So we still had several hours worth of work to do once we got it off the dyno at 7 o'clock. And Bob was a trooper. He hung out. He helped us the entire time, and he loaded it on the trailer at about 3:45 this morning, went home, got a few hours of sleep, and started driving to Florida. So we wish Bob and his girlfriend Margaret good luck down at sick week. His brother's going with them as well. We'll be watching. We're hoping that he shaves a second off his average, and we have a lot of work in that car to get it to make it, and we're really happy that everybody involved pulled the strings that they could to get the car finished. So we'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure you check out the other sick week videos that are out there. I know Motion's going to be doing a live feed on it. I'm sure there's a couple other companies that will be sharing their media coverage of it. This is all the sick week footage we're going to be bringing you as we start our own push to get to Florida in a couple weeks with the Tramp and the white car that's on its way down. We'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure you subscribe if you don't already. Hit the bell so you can get the notifications, and you guys will see what projects we're wrapping up in the next couple weeks here. Thanks a lot. Bye.